Greetings, everyone. My name is Michelle Claville, and I am the Vice President for Research and Policy Analysis at the Council for Higher Education Accreditation. I also serve as liaison to CHIA's International Quality Group. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the first of our 2024 CHIA CIQG webinar series. And today, as you've heard, our title is Microcredentials, Protecting Consumers Through Quality Assurance. We welcome all 300, and at last count, 314 of you registrants from over 36 nations outside of the United States. We still do not have a final count of our total number of registrants, but please know that we are very excited to have such an enthusiastic response to our invitation to participate in this webinar. It is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator of the conversation that you will hear today. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jamil Salmi. Most people who know anything about quality assurance you would have heard that name before. He is a global tertiary higher education expert, and especially in the field of quality assurance. Dr. Salmi, he has offered policy advice, consulting advice to several governments, universities, multilateral banks, and bilateral agencies. He's had years of experience at the World Bank. He is an author of numerous publications in the field of quality assurance and matters that pertain to tertiary or higher education. And then one of the things that is most important to us is that he is one of the members of our CIQG Advisory Council. And so without further ado, we welcome Dr. Jamil Salmi, and we leave the rest of the webinar in his hands.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for this kind introduction. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are joining us from. And welcome to this webinar on microcredentials and quality assurance. As Michelle mentioned, I lived for many years in Washington, D.C. And I remember when my oldest son went to study computer science in Canada at the University of Toronto. To tell you the truth, this is because it was relatively cheaper than in the US, but still quite expensive for international students. So imagine my surprise when, in the course of his studies, at some point he asked me to pay additional fees because he had to take a Cisco certificate. And then again, the following year, an Oracle certificate. But later on, after he started to work, he explained to me how important these short trainings focused on professional skills had been. And in fact, we hear today of employers who are more inclined to hire university graduates who have a few micro-credentials than those who don't, or even of successful job seekers who have micro-credentials instead of a university degree. With the proliferation of micro-credentials, however, come many questions. How do we know which ones are useful, which ones are not? What competencies and skills participants actually acquire? How to compare micro-credentials across institutions and countries? Indeed, recognition and validations of these micro-credentials have become an essential part of the equation. And to help us understand these issues today, I feel so privileged to have with us today 3 distinguished experts in these fields. And these are not people who study micro-credentials as an academic topic, but practitioners who organize and deliver them, and or who participate in their assessment and validation. So each of our 3 guests will make a 10-minute presentation to introduce the topic from their own professional perspective. And then they will spend 25 minutes answering your questions. You have all seen their bios in the webinar announcement. I will just say a few words about each one of them. We will start with Dr. Quentin McAndrew, who is the global academic strategist at Coursera in the US. And she has a very interesting professional itinerary because she came from a traditional university where she helped break new paths through the design and use of professional master programs and MOOCs, was University of Colorado in Boulder. And then she moved to one of the most innovative institutions today in the world, Coursera. And Quentin has won many awards for her writing and research. And she's now going to share with her combined private sector and higher education experience. Before I give her the floor, let me introduce, or maybe I'll introduce the next speaker when it's her turn. Quentin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jamil, for that lovely introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. We're really looking forward to the discussion today and answering your questions. As Jamil said, let me just share and give you just a touch of background about Coursera. So I always like to start with Coursera's mission. And Jamil so kindly said, I was at the University of Colorado Boulder, a public institution, and I moved to Coursera, which is a publicly traded company. But I moved to Coursera because we envision a world where anyone, anywhere has the power to transform their life through learning. And we're a certified B Corp in the United States, which means we're a benefit corporation, and we are required by law and by regulation to actually live our mission. And so I know, like many of you, this is what we are all passionate about. And so at Coursera, we like to talk about our triangle. We have over 100 million registered learners on our platform from all over the globe. I have a course on Coursera myself that I did when I was in Colorado, and I have learners from 165 countries in my course. We have 300 educator partners, university partners who are creating content on the platform in non-credit formats and degrees. And we have world-class industry partners who are creating those micro-credentials that Jamil just mentioned on the platform for learners everywhere. And then we work with 7,000 institutions all over the world, other universities, government agencies, workforce development, to help provide opportunities and pathways to build economic health in the regions of the world that we work in. And Coursera's content stacks, it goes from very small units all the way into a degree, and we have an enormous catalog of opportunity for students. And what we do is we watch trends in higher education across that whole platform. So as Jamil suggested, we're seeing globally a rising demand for credit eligible industry micro-credentials. So taking that Cisco certificate that his son had in college and saying, I want to actually not just earn the certificate, but earn credit for it and apply it to a degree. We're also in, as we all know, and we're talking about exhaustively, in this moment of extraordinary change and transformation, where Gen AI is putting even more pressure on us to upskill and reskill and keep pace with change as it accelerates. And we're seeing a heightened focus by employers on skills-based hiring. And the way to make those skills very apparent for learners is to earn an industry certificate. So we're seeing across those 140 million learners on our platform, rising demand, as I said, for credit eligible industry certificates. And what we see is that 76% of degree interested students are more likely to enroll in a degree that also has a certificate. And in speaking to these students in a qualitative study, they don't devalue the degree. They don't want to replace their degree. They want to enhance the degree. So they still believe in the value of that ultimate credential, but they want something that complements that degree, that shows that they're job ready when they graduate. And 1 in 2 students want that professional students. And then from the employer side, what we're seeing is that they're considering, almost all of them, moving to skills-based hiring that says, do you know how to code? Do you know how to write? And how can I validate those skills when I'm hiring a student? And 88% of employers believe that an industry micro-credential enhances the job application for learners. So as we face, the idea that we must provide our learners with a return on investment of their tuition, the industry credential becomes more and more important. And as I talk about this, I also want to make clear, I have 3 degrees in English. I'm a humanist. I believe in the wonderful ability of education to totalize a human being, and education for education's sake is a valid goal. But in today's world, where we're increasingly charged with delivering education to learners who've never had access to that education, what we're doing is providing them with economic mobility. So that's very important for us to deliver. So we help students at Coursera earn valuable professional certificates from world-class brands that are job relevant. And a lot of them are entry level, so that learners can get their first job and then continue their education and get their next job and manage their careers. And one of the ways that we're ensuring quality is not for Coursera or for our corporate partner like Google or IBM or Microsoft to say these credentials are worthy. We do say that, but we are working with credit recommending bodies all over the world to say, as a third party, we agree that this content is worth credit. So we're working with ACE in the United States, FIBA and ECTS in EMEA, and in India, we're working with NSQF to provide the same credit recommendation so that our university partners can then take the certificates to the faculty. And of course, the faculty review the content and must agree. The ultimate credit award comes from the university, but that allows universities to say, okay, we can really consider this as a possibility. And so what we're seeing on the platform is that learners are coming in and they can take these certificates and they can either, or it's not linear, move into a career and now increasingly move into a degree via recognition of prior learning for that credit, so that we're able to say to them as they're moving their way, for instance, through the Google Data Analytics certificate, did you know that you could earn credit towards a degree? And what we see increasingly is that gives learners confidence that they can do a degree. It makes them happy because they've earned something that's really valuable for them, and it lowers the price of the degree as transfer credit into the degree. So it's incredibly valuable for learners. It gives them outcomes, and we're tremendously excited about the work that we're doing. Jamil, thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Quentin, for this very summary but very insightful overview, and for keeping to time. I will turn now to Dr. Tina Seufert, who is going to be our second speaker. She hails from Ulm University in southern Germany, where she is presently the scientific director of the School of Advanced Professional Studies. And her university is a leader in Germany and in Europe, I would say, in the implementation of micro-credentials as part of individual career path and continuing education. A psychologist by training, is an expert in teaching and learning in both the digital and analog formats. Without further ado, over to you, Tina.
Thank you so much, Jamil, for the nice introduction and for the opportunity to be here. I'm happy to share my expertise and my views and thoughts about micro-credentials, which are actually at the top of our discussions for the last few months and even years. So I share my slides that you can see a little bit more about what I'm talking about. It's the School of Advanced Professional Studies, the higher continuing education institution at Ulm University and also of the University of Applied Sciences in Ulm. And yeah, we are happy that we can, I'm sorry, do you see my slides actually in the right form? Is it?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah, okay, thank you, because I was a little bit irritated here. I have another picture. So yeah, it's a shared institution of two universities, and my position there is to be a kind of educational manager on the one hand, and I'm also a researcher on learning instruction. So I'm also interested in how learning is affected and how learning can be organized so that it is effectively. And of course, I'm a teacher in these courses. And with these three perspectives, I want to give you a short overview of what we are doing when we talk about micro-credentials and about stackable units for degrees. We have these continuing pieces of individual learning courses and learning paths. So we have the nuggets. This is the smallest unit, actually. Then we have a certificate course, and we can put bundles of certificates together for a certificate of advanced study or a diploma of advanced studies. This is a Swiss a kind of new bundle system, which is certificated and graduate and eligible in all over the world. And we have the master degree programs, of course. And to understand a little bit more how these different pieces go together to one picture for individual paths and with different goals for each individual, I will show you an example from my master degree program, which I developed. It's a micro-credential course, and we start first with a few informations about micro-credentials. It's in Germany defined now as a certificate course with 1 to 9 credit points regarding the ECTS scheme, for example. It's a course and regularly also an exam or performance report. So it's not only taking a course, listening to videos and simply listening and doing nothing. So you have to report what you learn, and you have to reflect on that and hand in a kind of exam or performance report. So this is the micro-credential which is defined in our way. So the certificate of advanced studies means that we sample together 1 to 3 certificate courses. It's about 10 credit points at least, and it's booked separately. So we have these different courses, and afterwards we can decide, oh, now we make a practical transfer project, for example, and then we can be certificated for this CAS, this Swiss kind of system for crediting. And of course, you can do even more with 30 credit points. You have a bundle of 4 to 6 certificate courses, which are also booked separately. And then you have to write a small thesis. It's about 30 to 40 pages in our case, mostly. And of course, then you can decide to even go further when you make the experience that it suits you, that you are able to learn in these formats. For example, we very often have blended learning formats, and of course, not everyone is used to that kind of learning. And if you make the mastery experience that you really gain knowledge and competence and not only certificates, and you see, okay, that's my way, my individual path for learning, you can even enroll for the master program and end the program with a master thesis. And now I'm coming to my example in my instructional design course. So I have a study program for instructional design. It's for teachers, it's for psychologists, it's even for computer scientists. And we teach how to design information and instruction digitally and in analog words. So we start with a micro nugget, master nugget. It's teaching with digital media. It's only 1 credit point, 25 to 30 hours, and it's about 230 euros. And if you book this teaching with digital media nugget, you also can use that for the next level for the micro-credential with 6 credit points. It's the digital teaching and learning module, so-called module. And when we sample different modules, you can have a diploma of advanced studies. And we have one, for example, with 30 credit points for teaching and learning in analog and digital learning environments. And again, you can see that the courses are stackable and reusable for the even higher degrees, and you can use them, and they are credited for the Master of Science program. And it's not only credited regarding the competencies, but also regarding the costs. So you can decide step by step, what is your learning path? What is your learning necessity? What do you need to know in your working environment at the moment? So you book the micro-credential, the simple course, the single course, and learn that. And if you see there is more need for more competencies or more motivation or more interest, then you can sample and stack the things together for your individual learning path. That's the organization which I'm dealing with as an educational manager, so to say. And now I'm coming to the perspective, in which way is this micro-credential in the head of the learners stacked together to a competence and to a larger picture, to a bigger picture? And this is my interest as a learning and research, learning and instruction researcher. And what I'm highlighting here is a kind of sandwich. I hope for those who have lunchtime, it's not too embarrassing here. So we have this digital didactical concept for example, where we have input videos and activating prior knowledge. So not only we have micro-credentials, which are stackable in terms of courses, but also when we take a closer look into the courses, there are also snippets and nuggets of knowledge which are then refined and discussed in groups, for example. And this is also kind of a stackable nugget piece in this term. It's the sandwich. And of course, you have then many sandwiches when you have, for example, 3 micro-credentials. And the question is how to combine these in your mind. And of course, you need practical transfer projects. This is what we introduced in our, for example, DAS, Diploma of Advanced Studies, or we have e-portfolios so that you really see the bigger picture, how things fit together. And of course, in the end, you can have a DAS or master thesis where you need all the competencies with all your mini nuggets in your head and combine these for larger competencies. From the formats, we use blended learning. We have this module choice. We have this modular concept with the stackability and the creditability. And of course, we have learning settings which suit continuing education while working. So we have adaptable learning speed or individual learning times with blended learning and very large online parts in our courses. So that's my introduction, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Back to Jamil. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tina. This is very didactic, very instructive. Last but not least, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Porrick Walsh, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Ireland's main agency responsible for quality assurance and the qualifications framework. It's called QQI, Quality and Qualifications Ireland. And I want to add that Dr. Walsh is a chemical engineer by training. And before heading the island's QA agencies in various shapes and through their history, he has had also important positions at universities in Ireland. And he's also served on governance bodies for quality assurance agencies in several European countries and in the US. And he was also the elected president of ENQA. And if you work in quality assurance, you would know that this is the umbrella body for all quality assurance agencies in Europe. Over to you, Porrick.
Thanks very much, Jamil, for that very kind introduction. And thanks to Gia for inviting me on this. And I hope to follow up with the colleagues who've spoken there. I'll just share my presentation. Okay, as Jamil said, my name is Pádraig Walsh. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Quality and Qualifications Ireland. QQI was established back in 2012. We are the National External Quality Assurance Agency for post-secondary education, so everything except the school system in Ireland. We're also the body that are responsible for the Irish National Framework of Qualifications. Like most countries in Europe, we have a national framework of qualifications for all levels: general school education, further vocational education, and higher education. We're also unusual in that we are the validating, awarding, and certifying body for post-secondary providers that do not have their own awarding power. So outside of the public universities, you actually get your programs accredited or validated by QQI, and you will receive a QQI certificate from that. So we're both a quality assurance body, but also a certifying body. Okay, so the Irish National Framework is one of the oldest in Europe and hence one of the oldest in the world. It's over 20 years old. It's a 10-level framework that covers general, school, vocational, what we term further education, and higher education. And the National Framework contains the awards of the self-accrediting, so the public university, and all of QQI awards. So that includes those from the public and private further education and from private higher education providers. You can see the diagram there. That's the fan diagram that QQI developed a number of years ago, and that's been borrowed or copied by a number of countries around the world. Shows the 10 levels that we have for our National Framework of Qualification. Just for reference, level 5 is the kind of high school graduate diploma. Level 8 would be a bachelor's degree, level 9 a master's degree, and level 10 doctoral degree within that. So all public universities are required to have their qualifications included in the National Framework of Qualifications. Our awards are all learning outcomes based, so they're based on standards of knowledge, skill, and competence. And the Irish framework, looking for us from its inception, contained major awards, so the standard bachelor, master's, and doctoral degrees that you would have, but also facilitated the use of having smaller awards, termed minor, supplemental, and special purpose awards. A minor award is a single module which can be completed and certified individually, and all minor awards are linked to a major award and can be stacked towards gaining a major award. Minor awards are largely found in further or vocational education because they were meant really to facilitate people who couldn't learn in a single go and wanted to be able to stack those over time. Supplemental awards are ones that can recognize learning with updating, upskilling, or continuing education and training. And special purpose awards are developed for specific areas of learning that have a more narrow scope. So minor, supplemental, and special purpose awards, and that's the terms that we used back in 2003, you can see, share characteristics of what we would now term micro-credentials. All programs, major and non-major, that lead to awards in the Irish National Framework of Qualifications are included in the Irish Register of Qualifications, which is maintained by QQI. And the IRQ, which is www.irq.ie, is searchable so that, for instance, someone looking at them could find all awards in, say, the higher education space that have awards of 30 or less ECTS credits, which most people would understand as being in the domain of micro-credentials. So someone can go in and see what is being offered that is within the National Framework of Qualifications that really would look like a micro-credential. That's what our IRQ site looks like. The hyperlink is in there on that. That's a register that includes all of the qualifications, all the provider who offer those, and all the individual courses that lead to any award in the National Framework of Qualifications, including bachelor, master's, and doctoral degrees, but also any of the short micro-credential type awards that are offered by Irish education providers. I did a search in advance of this here, and if you search between 0 and 30 ECTS for higher education, so at level 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, you'll find about 2,500 qualifications that are in there. Some of the ones you can see if you zoom in there: certificate in digital design and fabrication, action research, interior design methods. These are all 15 or 30 credit modules. So these are all available to take individually, but many of them can also be used to stack towards an award. So all qualifications, I suppose importantly in the Irish NFQ, have a level associated with them. And that allows the learner to understand how the learning in a module, like a micro-credential, will compare to, say, a bachelor's degree, which is at level 8. So level 8 micro-credential would be comparable in learning difficulty, if you like, to what you'd expect to meet in a bachelor's degree and at the upper levels of that. The volume of learning then, say, 10 ECTS, would also allow the learner to compare with, say, a 4-year bachelor's degree, which has 240 ECTS. So the learner in those cases both knows the degree of difficulty and, I suppose, the volume of learning that's associated within that. All qualifications that are included in the Irish NFQ, including micro-credentials, must undergo quality assurance procedures according to the European standards and guidelines. That's the standards and guidelines for quality assurance in the European higher education area. Just a couple of initiatives in our own country around national micro-credentials recently. There's been a funding initiative from the Irish government called Human Capital Initiative, and they are funding a project called Microcreds.ie, which is an initiative of the 7 largest and oldest public universities in Ireland, available with government funding of about €12 million, close to $12 million for a 5-year period. That's the website for Microcreds. This is put together by the 7 public universities and looks at the type of courses that are available within there. Just 3 I can read down there. One on advancing healthcare, one on climate leadership, one on learning technology and innovation. And in a further guide this year, the Irish government has decided to provide a subsidy or a fee for learners who wish to take those. So our Higher Education Authority, which is the funding body for higher education in Ireland, and the Department of Further and Higher Education, so the relevant ministry department, has introduced an 80% learner subsidy on 300 individual micro-credentials offered by the universities in particular areas. And they're areas that the Irish government has prioritised for particular skills. So €3.4 million funding in areas like renewable energy, sustainability, construction, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. On the European side, there is a micro-credential project called Microball, which micro-credentials linked to the key Bologna process. And in June 2022, the Council of the European Union had a recommendation on the European approach to micro-credentials and lifelong learning and employability. The Quality Assurance Agency, ENQA, the one of which I was the president, of which QQI is a member, more recently in February 2024, published a working group report on quality assurance of micro-credentials. Within that, there's a specific report of a case study from QQI about our development of micro-credentials. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Ulrich. And thank you all 3 for keeping to the time, and you've generated lots of questions. So I suggest we move directly to the questions. Tina and Quentin have even started to answer in writing, and there is one for you, Ulrich, but I think these are very important questions, and it would be good to share your answers to with all participants. The first one is about stacking. Is it just a theory, a nice thought, or is it happening concretely? And perhaps Tina and Quentin could say from the perspective of Ulm University and Coursera how it is happening. Maybe we start with Tina in Ulm and then move to Quentin.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've already written that our students stack courses a lot. So they use this opportunity. It's not only theoretical, it's really practice, and it's very individual. It's not that they stack all in the same way, that they all use the same 3 pieces to one bundle. So, but each and every one has a single and individual sample. So it's done very often, and it's very much appreciated. And I think this is what Quentin also answered, that the students love that way to test and to stack and to be individual in their course choices.
Thank you. Quentin.
Tina, that was an amazing presentation. What I really loved was the intentional design of every piece of content that builds all the way into a degree. I thought that was extraordinary. I was so inspired by that. And what I shared when I typed my answer is that university partners on Coursera come to us to enact stackability. And so one of the things that we have the ability to do is to link non-credit content so that it stacks into a degree, either through recognition of prior learning or CPL in the United States, or learners can start in non-credit courses and take that progress and transfer it into a degree course, which is wonderful. Think about if you're not quite sure if you're ready for a degree or you want to test it before you pay tuition, you can go in and say, okay, I, Quentin, am interested in graduate level photonics. Can I do it with my 3 English majors? And I can give it a try. And then that progress moves into the degree with me. And the other piece of stackability that we've enacted on the platform is admissions stackability. We also have a partner, that the University of Illinois, that has an MBA that's highly competitive to get into, and they have a master's of management. And so students who complete the master's of management, if they couldn't get into the MBA in the first place, that master's of management is the first year of the MBA. And so then they're able to get the highest credential available. So a lot of partners on Coursera are being very innovative with stackability.
Thank you very much.
Maybe
Tori, could you comment on what is happening in Ireland in that respect? And then you could also take on the specific question about possibly having 3 different definitions of microcredentials or level in Ireland. I don't know if you saw that question.
I did, and I answered it directly to the,
Okay.
maybe the question as maybe it only went back to the individual. I mean, there's always a challenge around definitions. As I said, we were using microcredentials before people used the actual term, but everyone hasn't come to a common definition on it. But in the case of the 3 bodies there, we're actually the awarding body in relation to the funding for further education. So there should be no real confusion there. And as I pointed out, I actually came from a meeting on Monday where we were meeting with the institution, the 7 traditional universities, just to try and make sure that the information that we provide to learners on microcredentials is consistent. I think as a quality assurance agency, we have to do that. Following up maybe on what Quentin was talking about, the real issue that we see now is the cashability or the currency exchange of qualifications. People know that particularly vendor type awards like Cisco type awards are internationally transferable. What they can't do to date is level them against their own understanding of where do these fit on our national framework. So we actually have a new scheme that will come into operation later this year that will allow us term where we can put listed awarding bodies. These are bodies other than universities that will be able to come to QQI to make sure that their awards can be compared with similar type awards, and that those then could be used or stacked or used in an intercalated manner by learners. We've even had Microsoft this year who were interested in coming to QQI to get a QQI award for some of their CPD type programs. So that's something that we will be looking. We recognize the international transferability, but there also has to be some way of locally leveling these, and that's something that we're actively working on. And if you were doing this time next year, I'd hope we'd be able to update people.
Thank you very much. We're getting now even more questions that I think we will have time to answer, but let me try to bring some of them together. I mean, the big question is, how do you provide good quality assurance, solid quality assurance, reliable quality assurance for these various micro-credentials? Are we really being as rigorous as we are for traditional degrees? That's one question. And then over time, you know, the beauty of micro-credential is that you can organize your own path, and it can take time if you are working. But one of the questions was, how do you make sure that the micro-credential I took 4 years ago is still valid and I'm still skilled in that specific area? who wants to start answering these questions?
I'll take a stab at that question.
Thank you,
First,
Quentin. Go ahead.
of course, the first part of the question is, how do we know that micro-credentials are as rigorous as university learning? And Parag, the work that you're doing is amazing to make the value of the micro-credential transparent to the learner and validated. I think that is a big question with this proliferation of options from boot camps and what is a micro-credential and how long is it and what are the skills that you really get. For Coursera, for us, it rests with our university partners. And so the credit recommendation from an independent body is exceptionally important, but that doesn't actually award credit, as all of you know. The university faculty still have to go through and validate the content and say, yes, this is worthy of our institution's award of credit. So there's always deep faculty review. And then in India, we're working on an initiative to provide an additional verified assessment so that learners and institutions know that that skill is still current. So that's one way that we're addressing it.
Thank you. Tina, Ori?
Yeah, maybe the question about how can we know that that the knowledge the learner gained 5 years ago is still present or is still valid or even relevant. I think it's a tricky one. But anyway, I think when universities, they need to be open. And I think this micro-credential idea is an openness of universities. So we credit things the learner brings with them by different certificates. We look at that, we value it, and we credit that. So it's important that we are open even for things that have been learned 5 years ago. And I think what is needed is a transparency, how like Porrig is presenting here. And we need a really good and clear description of what the competencies really are. For example, with our courses, we also deliver a diploma supplement with all the learning goals and all the competencies. Even for the little slightest nugget, we provide that, so that the learner really can tell and show and visualize what is learned and what is earned in a way. So this is the way we try to ensure quality and to provide information about the competencies, even if they are 5 years ago.
Maybe if I
Thank you,
on the currency issue, I took graduate courses in Syracuse University in New York in 1984, and even back then, it was possible to take the same course twice over the course of a doctorate in the area of microprocessor design, because the reckoning was that it would be out of date 2 years later. So the currency issue has been around for, I've just said, that's 40 years ago. Sorry, I'm showing my age here, obviously. But on the term of actually accrediting within, or as Quentin said, it's often important for the person that a recognized body can recognize the micro-credential in a way that people will trust. And I suppose for us, the value is that we are an awarding body and certifying body, as well as the university. So you don't have to. So someone can come directly to QQI to do that, but you have to go through a process. And this is the problem, I think, that people have, is that it's very hard to do it right, to do it high quality, and to do it quick. You can do maybe 2 of those 3. So if what you're doing is you don't want to subject it to that, then maybe you don't really want it to be as part of this frame. It doesn't mean it has value, but if you want it to have some currency, you have to be prepared to go through some form of appropriate quality assurance process for it.
Thank you. One question that has also been raised is, do you see micro-credentials in all fields, or do you see some specialization in recent years? And even one of the Richard Justice was asking one of the participants whether you have seen micro-credentials in the field of theology.
I don't know about a micro-credential on theology, but one of my students is a theology student, who just learned about instructional design. So there might be something out at the end of the year when she's finished her courses. So that might be an option. I think it's maybe it's prone to some domains more than to others, the micro-credential idea, because some of the domains, when I'm talking, for example, with our engineers, they say our knowledge base is not so easily put it into pieces. They see it themselves as a whole theory or a whole model, and you cannot learn that in different little pieces. So sometimes I think the domain thinking and the epistemological ideas and attitudes might stand in the way of that. But I'm sure that even then they have courses and they have lectures with different weeks where they present stackable pieces. And that's what I'm trying to tell them and convince them that they can use even then when they have larger models and bigger pictures to break them down into pieces. But it's it might be a domain specific cultural thing to say.
Coursera works in so many countries. What do you see at this
Yes,
point? And then I will ask
seeing,
Ulrich to give the European perspective. Go ahead.
What we're really seeing is not so much domain adherence of microcredentials, but cross-disciplinary use of microcredentials to enhance a degree. So, my 3 English degrees, we have more and more liberal arts students taking technical microcredentials to help them signal that their durable skills from the humanities are augmented with immediate workplace skills. So that's one real value of the microcredential that I see, is that students can cross-pollinate and build their skills outside of their domain with a microcredential.
Thank you, Ulrich.
I always take these things back to the personal. My daughter works as brand manager for Heineken in Europe. She's an undergraduate commerce business degree, but she didn't want to spend either the time or felt that she needed to do a master's degree in an area like digital marketing. But she was interested in the area of digital marketing. And the problem was, until relatively recently, all that was open to her was to take a full master's program because there simply weren't micro-credentials available. She didn't need to do all, but she needed to do particular pieces of it. So I think in many cases, the market has been in the sort of components of master's degree area for people. And to be honest, I think, and I asked this of a number of the universities when I met them earlier this week, the majority of people in Ireland taking micro-credentials already have qualifications. They already have bachelor or master's qualifications. So, and the sort of fields that they're picking them up in are along the lines of what Quintin just talked about there, or Tina, in more technical areas where they want to add knowledge and skills. But it's great now that these are available where they weren't, and that the student doesn't have to commit to a year or 2 years to advance themselves and to get certified, accredited training in particular areas.
There are the last 2 questions. The first one is about pricing of microcredentials and the availability of financial aid. You mentioned, Ulrich, that in Ireland there are public resources. Are you aware of any other, the 3 of you, of any other countries or institutions that provide financial aid for microcredentials? And the last question is about the impact of microcredentials on industry itself. Is it becoming a model for our standard for employability of graduates or non-graduates?
I can take a quick stab and then turn it over to my good colleagues. We see even entire national governments around the world providing microcredentials to their population because of the economic benefit for them. So, for instance, Kazakhstan. So that's really interesting. And then also regional and local governments will do that, as well as employers and universities. And there is financial aid available on Coursera. I think one of the things about microcredentials, especially for a degree interested learner, is that on Coursera, so I can just give the Coursera example. So forgive me, I don't mean to just be Coursera centric. It's about $49 a month for a 6-month credential. It's self-paced, so learners can either expand or contract that timeline. But relative to a credit hour, that's a big savings, and having that outcome is really useful. And I think this is a really provocative question, which is, if you're entering the job market and a job candidate doesn't have a micro-credential and a job candidate does it actually increase the pressure that becomes the new standard? I think that's provocative and possibly the direction that we're moving. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Thank you very much, Quentin. Tina.
Yeah, we also have financial aids, but it's very limited actually. And I think that might be a problem actually, because the employers don't see the benefit directly sometimes. And even in our case, there was a question whether employers are aware of micro-credentials. I'm not sure about that in Germany. I think they just start to learn that there are these micro nugget mini courses which they can use and which they can ask for. I think that's a perspective we haven't taken by now. And I think it's very important that we also think of the teacher side or the university as a provider side. We have the expertise, but we don't know what the employers need for competencies for their employees. So there must be a kind of communication process, and we need to learn about the needs in the firms, and then we can develop the micro-credentials together maybe with the employers, and then we can offer it to this one employer, but also to the broader public. So it's interesting and very important, I think, that we have this communication process to see what is needed. And then, of course, the employer is also very often willing to pay for it, because it's directly that what he's asking for or she's asking for, and what the employees can learn with us. So it's in Germany, it's just a starting point where we are with this discussion and this communication process. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tina. Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you've a chicken, egg, and cart and horse thing here first. Of what drives what? We had a review in Ireland of a skills review by the OECD in 2023, and one of the issues coming around that has to do with a necessity for skills in particular areas, ones that you'll all be familiar with. You know, green skills, environmentally sustainable skills, stuff like eco-driving or assisted driving, etc. And the driver for this often is government policy, and government drives policy and drives action by putting money up. And that's often the case. And then the universities will follow in those cases and develop the particular programs that are there. So that cycle is there in these particular cases. On the type of people who take these up, I found it very interesting in my own case that quite a number of my own staff have taken micro-credentials. Again, these are people that would have bachelor or master's degrees, but wanted things in the area of governance, for instance, or in public policy or public procurement. So it was a very valuable short lesson for them. And I've noticed, we've done quite a lot of recruitment recently, and I've been interviewing and going through CVs, how many people, in addition, list the micro-credentials that they've taken. And in my case, if they're micro-credentials in our framework, I know what they are. I know what level they are. So I think that's becoming increasingly important in the market.
Thank you so much. I have the unfortunate task of bringing this session to a close before Michelle gives us a last few comments. But as you can see, I cannot summarize the rich conversation that we had because we don't have time. And I would not really do justice to the great information, insightful experiences that our three panelists have shared. I hope you have all learned as much as I have learned. And Michelle, you can see that obviously we need to have a follow-up seminar or webinar, because we were not able to respond to all the good questions. So we'll have micro-credentials too. And since it's stackable, that will be very, very useful. And I started with a personal anecdote. I would want to finish with one, if you allow me. Back in '74, I was finishing my first degree in Paris. ahead of going to the US for a master's degree. And my mother told me at that time that she would buy me a personal portable typewriter because she said in the US, students were used to typing their papers, which didn't exist in France at that time. But my mom put a condition. She said, but you have first to go to secretarial school to learn to touch type. And so for 1 hour a day, 14 days, I learned to touch type. And, you know, many years ago, or maybe 8 years later, when I bought my first personal computer, I was ready. And I realized that this first experience of what we could call today a micro-credential prepared me so well for the digital world of the future. I tell you, when I joined the World Bank, they were not using computers yet. And then they introduced computers and they told all the professionals, you have to type yourself. And I remember how so many of my colleagues suffered to go through this transition. Please join me in thanking very heartily our three panelists who really shared very insightful views and perspective and gave us a lot of learning in this webinar. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jamil. I agree with you. I thank you, Jamil, for being our moderator for today's webinar. And as I've already said, I agree that this has been certainly a very rich session. So I join you in thanking our speakers, Doctors Quentin McAndrew, Dr. Tina Seifert, and Dr. Pareg Walsh. We also thank you, the audience, for joining us as we launched our 2024 webinar series. And we hope you'll join us again when we announce our second one, because we will have more certainly later this year. Please know that the recording for this webinar will be available to you. We will be certain to email all participants that the webinar is available on our website. So please be on the lookout for that. The questions, as Jamil has mentioned, should you have more questions, feel free to contact us at Chia CIQG to see how you may engage with our speakers. That being said, we thank you again for joining us. Again, last count, we were just really pleased that there were over 300 participants out, not including those from the United States. We hope to see that same kind of enthusiasm as we continue throughout the year. And by the way, I'll put a plug in for Chia CIQG. If you have not been a member today, this is the time to do it. Thank you so much, and you enjoy the rest of your day, night, and week.